Hey, Center Grace family, happy Wednesday. It's good to be back with you again. And thanks to everybody who's been reaching out, checking on us, seeing how we're doing. Thankfully, we are feeling better and on the mend. So we appreciate that. Well, today we're going to continue our conversation in thinking through how to grow in our affection for God. Because remember, that's one of the attributes of a disciple, that a disciple would perpetually, continually grow in their intimacy with and affection for God. And it got me thinking a little bit about how on my phone sometimes or my computer, it'll remind me, of a special event or a special moment that we had as a family at various times. Maybe there will be a birthday or something like that, that my phone will remind me that I took a bunch of pictures on that day, and I can scroll through those memories. Or, if you're on social media, you probably have a similar kind of experience. Maybe every day you get a list of people who are your Facebook friends because it's their birthday, and it allows you to remember to reach out to them and wish them a happy birthday on that day. And all of that kind of got me thinking about how in the religious calendar, whether it's in Judaism or in Christianity, the church calendar, the religious calendar, was originally set up to encourage God's people to remember and to celebrate, right? To think back to some of those amazing things that God had done and to remember who He was. And then that they would be able to celebrate those things, the way that God had brought them out of Egypt, or the way that God had delivered them under the Persian rule during the days of Esther. And they have these special events, these special holidays that would mark every one of those experiences in life. And over the course of time, though, here was the problem. All of that was supposed to be meant for remembrance and celebration, it became, drudgery. It became ritual. It became more duty than it was delight. But in their best moments, and in our best moments, we mark those special events, a birthday, an anniversary, however long we've been friends with people on Facebook, right? Like we mark those things because it reminds us of all of the different things that we've experienced together with that special friend or with that person or with our spouse. And in our best moments on those special days, we are doing those very two same things that God's people were originally supposed to do with those holidays. We remember and we celebrate. And in human relationship, it's no different than in our relationship with God, right? We need to have certain reminders. We need to have rhythms, if you will, to remind us to remember and remind us to celebrate. And I think all over the Psalms, you see those two activities from God's people. They're constantly trying to remind themselves of who God is and what He's done, and then they celebrate Him. Take just one example. Let me read just a couple of opening verses from Psalm 18. And this psalm actually uses the word love or affection in its response to God. Listen to these words from David. He says, "I love you, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer. My God, my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of salvation, my stronghold. I call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from my enemies." Again, you could read countless Psalms. Right now, I'm working through trying to memorize Psalm 145 and Psalm 34 to remind me of who God is, because I'm trying to remember. But in those moments when you're celebrating an anniversary, when you're celebrating somebody's birthday, what you're really trying to do is celebrate who that person is, or remember who that person is, right? You want to remember their attributes. And if we're going to grow in our affection for God, one of the two things we want to talk about today is first that we need to remember God's attributes. Now, God's attributes, another way of saying that is that we could describe God's perfection. Sometimes theologians refer to it that way, that every one of God's characteristics He is perfectly. So you can make a list. God is merciful. He's faithful. He's good. He's kind. He's righteous. He's compassionate. He's just. He's loving. He's gracious. The list could go on and on and on. And if you're looking for a resource that kind of tries to plumb the attributes of God, I would recommend A.W. Tozer's book, The Attributes of God. The subtitle of that book is Deeper to the Father's Heart. When we begin thinking about the attributes of the people that we love, when we have an anniversary or we celebrate a birthday, we're thinking about who that person is. And we need to do the same thing with God. We need to remember his attributes. And then that necessarily leads us into that second thing. We celebrate. We remember God's attributes, but then we celebrate God's worth. And again, all throughout the Psalms, we see God's people doing that. We see them doing it with prayers of thanksgiving and prayers of praise. You could view the Psalms in one sense as like the activity of journaling. Maybe that's something that you could do as you want to try to deepen in your affection for God. Journal. Write down what you love about God's attributes, about who he is and what he's done. As you do that, it's just like writing a love letter or writing a thank you card or something like that. We do those things even in human relationships to deepen our affection for the people that we care about, the people that we love. And the same thing is true in relationship with God. And so what we're trying to do in those moments, whether it's in a human relationship or in our relationship with God, we're trying to remember who that person is, and we're trying to celebrate that person's importance in our lives. And the same things are true in our relationship with God. So in what ways will you remember God's attributes, and will you celebrate his worth even today? Is there one attribute that you can spend the next 10 or 15 minutes just thinking through, journaling on, praying about? Remember who God is and celebrate his worth. And as you do that, you're going to be deepening in your affection for God. We love you guys, and we'll see you again on Sunday.